voiceover there.
It's playing twice. Oh no, it's me. Fucking hell. That's me.
Right.
Hello, we live.
We're live. We're live. This is
Evening.
a program. We've got 5 people watching. Adam's in chat. Hello, Adam. So, right, did you say you had some? We're gonna do the warm open again, aren't we, for half an hour until our guest gets here at 8:30,
No.
aren't we?
It's all gone quiet.
No, we're all fine.
Oh, you're cutting out for
Am
me.
I chopping again? Oh, talk for a sec and then I'll just restart. Thingy.
All right.
So we've had technological issues.
No, I'm sorted now. Am I sorted now? Have I stopped being choppy?
I don't know. What's...
Am I choppy still, lads?
No, you sound good now.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
I'm still sort of getting over. I had a sort of nice day today, a sort of mystical day, in that I walked about a bit, and that was really early in the morning, and there was a really red sky in the morning. I know red sky in the morning, shepherd's warning, but I quite like red in the morning. So I was thinking that the red sky was above me, and I was thinking like red's quite a good colour, and I like red. And I went in the off license, and there was this new girl in there with like really, really long red hair, like one of the Vril maidens. And I thought, that's quite nice, red sky, red hair, and nice girl. So I'm sort of like riding the crest of that at the moment. Might not mean much to anyone else, but I quite enjoyed it.
So, did we? I think we actually discussed the other day about some sort of ideas for what we wanted to talk about. What did we say?
The red, London Bridge.
London Bridge, yes. You had some stuff about London Bridge, didn't you?
I've been doing a bit of because like now it's later on, and most of the news about the event's probably been reported. I thought like we could have a sort of a look at not necessarily what it really means, but a sort of lateral thinking sort of thing, just about the whole thing. I know it's very tragic and all that, and I don't want to be disrespectful, and I won't be, but it's just. I like to think about these things because I think often there's more to these things than meets the eye. I think a lot of these things have embedded, if I go into my schizo mode for a moment, I think a lot of these things have embedded codes in them and things like that. Like,
well, there's that.
Which sounds crazy.
Do you listen to the Higher Side chats, Zero?
I used to, yeah.
Yeah, he has that Swedish fella on, and he says that the Illuminati like to leave clues in like number plates and things like that. So
yeah,
they say you got to do what's it called? You've got to leave a warning in plain sight, even if in plain sight is frankly a bit suspect, like putting it in art and media.
It dates back all this sort of stuff, the media and all that. I think it dates back to James Shelby Downard, the American conspiracy researcher, and he did a lot of this stuff on the JFK assassination. And
well, that's where the phrase conspiracy theory comes from, doesn't it? It was just an easy way to offhandedly get rid of those pesky people that didn't think that the assassination.
The CIA invented the term, didn't they?
Yeah,
the CIA invented.
It's an early example of neurolinguistic programming. Yeah. You've got this trigger phrase. That's conspiracy theory. Oh, well, I best shut down my thinking then.
Yeah, I'm convinced they do. I'm convinced that the English language is not necessarily a magical. Well, it is. I think it is magical, but I think the very language itself contains within it an esoteric system. Because if you think about it, like say you're some sort of group of initiates or whatever, like back in Shakespeare's time, they're quite learned men, weren't they? And they obviously there was no TV and that, so they got into things, didn't they? And I think they encoded the the system in the actual language itself. Because if you've got a grimoire or a holy book, that can be edited and messed with, or even just like burns, So wouldn't it be a genius thing to encode their esoteric system in the language itself?
Well, hopefully it's if that's the case, it hasn't been perverted too much across the eons, because there's words now which do not mean the same things, and words back then which we just don't use anymore. I mean, you ever heard anybody use the word lummox?
No.
You heard that used. I looked it up what it was. It's like oath. But it's only Ren and Stimpy I ever heard the word lummox being used.
What does it mean then?
Oh, it just means a lumbering oath, more or less.
So, I forgot what I was going to say now.
I'm talking about how magic is encoding the language itself.
What I use is it's called the ordinal cipher, where A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, etc., up to Z equals 26. And I only tend to use like really old words, which would have been in use back in Shakespeare's time. And there's 26 letters in the English alphabet, and by this ordinal cipher, 26 is the number value of God, which to me is quite a good proof. There's more to it than that. I wrote a really long article on it, but I can't really get into it here. But I think there's certainly something to it. And like people have criticised me and said, like, well, that's just too simple. But surely, like in engineering, like the simplest thing is the best, isn't it? Surely. But,
I mean, if it does what you set out to do, and you've made it as simple as possible, there's elegance to that. So yeah, I agree. It's just a case of, is it doing what you want it to do?
Oh yeah, it does. Yeah, definitely. There's a whole. Like, I don't want to get too off the point here, but there's a whole thing. Like Aleister Crowley and his Book of the Law, and there's a whole cipher encoded in that, which people do say they used to communicate with extraterrestrials through it. And that's the whole.
Yeah, I mean, you say that he was in communication. Was it Lamb? Lamb looks a lot like the grey aliens we hear of.
That's there, isn't it, in black and white? Yeah, it's quite odd. Alan H. Greenfield's the man for the cipher of the Book of the Law. He wrote a book called Secret Ciphers of the UFO-Nauts and Secret Rituals of the Men in Black, which you can buy on Amazon. Like, the two books are in one volume, but it's a very bad job. That was published by Paranoia Press in America, but they've done a very bad job. The book's like really massive, with like really massive margins, where they should have just made it a trade paperback size. But I suppose you can scribble stuff in the big margins.
Whenever I've had a book, I've never felt compelled to scribble stuff on it.
Nah, I don't know. It's sacrilege, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it just doesn't seem right somehow.
I sometimes like it when I buy a second-hand book. Like, I just bought John Paul Sartre's Nausea second-hand, and someone's like underlined stuff in there. And sometimes that's sort of interesting. But I'd never do it myself. I'd never do it myself. But
yeah, they've gone over it with a highlighter or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm looking and I just think to myself, why on earth did they highlight that passage?
Yeah, highlighting's a bit much.
John Paul Sartre always reminds me of Red Dwarf. That one when Lister says John Paul Sartre said hell is eternity with your friends, and Rimmer says, yeah, but all his friends were French.
Knowing the French, I can understand why they get on your tits.
That bloke I knew, who I think was in that Cult of Death, he was really into John Paul Sartre. Yeah, he was a weird bloke.
I never read any of these philosophers. I like to pretend it's all big brained, and it's like, oh, I wouldn't want their influence to colour my own philosophy. But really, it's just like, I can't be asked reading their walls of text.
I know. I mean, I've sort of tried to read it, but yeah, it's just like, God, I don't know.
I mean, there's people that rant and rave about Bronze Age mindset, and it's interesting. He's got a peculiar turn of phrase, which I find entertaining, but I can't be asked to read the rest of the book.
Isn't that for people without their own philosophy who need philosophers?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think, there probably is something you could learn from them, or just go, oh, yeah, that's a clever way of thinking about stuff. I like that, but I don't have an appetite for it.
Having said that, though, I do quite like Nietzsche. That's quite good stuff if you're in the mood, sort of thing. But,
Oh, yes, in the original Esperanto.
In the original Esperanto.
What's that?
In the original Esperanto, he said.
It's a bit hard to. He does go on a bit, doesn't he? But I don't know.
Do you remember that? I mean, I think I might end up Red Dwarf posting tonight. But do you remember when Rimmer was doing Esperanto and he says something in Esperanto? He says, "You know what that means, don't you? It means call the hall porter. There's a frog in my b-day."
Yeah, it was always fun when Rimmer was just trying to just do Esperanto, and he always got it mangled up. But hey, Zero, you know that meme that goes around like saying, "Oh, of course, I read this Nietzsche, but I did it in the original German."
I don't know.
So that's why I just say I read it, but in the original Esperanto.
That's the problem. Like sometimes our movement gets into becoming a bit of a fart sniffing movement, doesn't it?
Well, you just have to accept with the extremely online people that the more online they are, the more autistic they are. And autistic people tend to be very much into fart sniffing and serious posting.
I think being online seems to sort of, the more you're online, the less you're sort of physically here in the real world, isn't it? Like, obviously, but that I think with a lot of these people, that's almost like they stop being like a physical being, and they become a sort of, I don't know, a sort of amorphous, sort of digitalized sort of.
They become a Gnostic being where they're sort of more concerned with mind over matter. There's a story I could probably tell you sometime off the air, Zero, where I had a good old question session with myself saying, like, what is the physical extent of my body? And is it like, just like the limits of my actual flesh and bone? Or is it something else? And it took me a while to sort of think of that. And I haven't got a conclusive answer for that, by the way. But the extent of my body and my influence is more than just my body.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. When I was younger, I used to like lie in bed and sort of send my hearing awareness out. Like, you're lying in bed and you hear things. I was trying to send my awareness out like as far as it could go.
Like an astral ear.
Yeah, sort of like an astral ear. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I wasn't really productive, but I sort of. I just got to expand your mind.
The philosophers never ask like real like head fuck questions like, where is the mind? Like, those pictures and everything you see inside your head. Where are they physically on Earth? Are they on Earth? Are they in a separate universe? Do they exist on their own, separate from the body? Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's a proper philosophical question, isn't it?
In addition to that, I mean, the next question I want to ask is, where do thoughts come from? And are there external thoughts, as in like ones which aren't from you, but they've been projected into you? And I reckon this is where schizophrenia comes from.
I think they're tuning into something, aren't they? Schizophrenics. I mean, it's a weird thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Do you think there is like a psychic internet? That like in some way we are some sort of hive mind. I mean, not like completely hive mind, like we're completely in it, but whether like general emotions kind of get picked up by everybody and things like that.
Well, I reckon we've got enough awareness that about telephone telepathy, or it's not even telephone telepathy, but in my case, I know when someone's going to get in touch with me, and unbidden, I'll start thinking about that person, even if I haven't spoken to them in years. And then the very next day, or sometimes the same day, they get in touch with me.
Yeah, that's so curious. Yeah,
it is a premonition. I'm thinking to myself, what am I getting? Like the notion that when I first get the notion, that's when they thought to call me, But no, I think it's from a different time.
I was back in the 80s. I was walking around Norwich one day in Norfolk, and suddenly I just started thinking about an old school friend, and I hadn't seen. I hadn't seen him for about 10 years. I was thinking like John, yeah. Why am I thinking of John? And like bugger me, like 10 minutes later, I ran into John in Norwich. Like, you know, it's just like, was he? I should have asked him. Like, were you thinking of me like 10 minutes ago as well? But, yeah, it's just like crazy, isn't it?
I've never thought to ask somebody. I mean, I've often said, "Oh, I was just thinking about you," but I never thought to say, "Were you thinking about me?" I always assume that yes, they were, but I should like say, "Ah, yes, at this time, 1447 hours, I started thinking about you." No, it doesn't work like that.
I mean, as possible, I could have sort of glimpsed his face like unconsciously, like earlier on in the day. And maybe
here's a good one. Here's a good one from Dissident Thoughts while we're on it. I remember years ago randomly thinking of Boris Yeltsin, and the next afternoon he passed away.
Yeah. Well, for whatever reason, Distant Thoughts has got a connection to Boris Yeltsin of all people. All the people I'm connected to are ones I know personally. But I mean, like I said, there's some people, I haven't spoken to in over 20 years. And as soon as I get a phone call, it's like, hello? Oh, it's you. That's strange. I was thinking of you the other day.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to all be connected, haven't we?
Well, you also get...
some connections.
Are you guys aware of the phenomena of doppelgangers? You know, where the husband's an airline pilot and the woman will be awake at night and like it's a bit dicey and the husband appears to her.
Yeah. When I was doing lucid dreaming, I used to see my doppelganger in my dreams, and that used to really freak me out. Like, it's like, bloody hell, I don't want to see you in my dream. I don't want to see me in my dream. Like, fucking hell.
Oh, was it you? Or was it just somebody wanted to take over your body?
Yeah, I mean, what if I made like a dummy of myself, like exactly the same weight and shape and sort of features and clothes I wear? What if I made like an exact replica of myself and put it in the corner of the room and sort of, I don't know. I don't think that's a very advisable thing to do, is it really?
Concentrated on it. Is that what
you're
going to go me for?
Or just having it in the room would be quite an odd thing. You might like wake up one day and that's took me over, and the dummy starts walking about, and like I'm left like shriveled up somewhere.
like a pod man, like the invasion of the body snatchers.
Oh god. Oh, back to London Bridge. Although it might be a bit boring now. We're talking about all this deep stuff, but. Why that bloody narwhal tusk? That's been sticking in my mind. Like, what a strange thing! Yeah, what a strange thing to sort of have. That was the narwhal tusk and the fire extinguisher, weren't it?
Yeah, I only actually found out about the narwhal tusks yesterday. I was kind of wondering why everyone was talking about narwhal tusks.
I looked it up. Yeah, I looked them up on the internet. Yeah, they are like really long tusked whale things, aren't they?
Well, apparently they used to be cut off and sold as unicorn horn.
Oh right, yeah, that's understandable.
Yeah, I've seen about narwhals before when I've read about unicorns, because obviously they look exactly like unicorn horn, don't they?
It just seems so odd. Like, of all things that come to hand to defend against this Alan Snackmara, it's just like, oh yeah, I've got a narwhal tusk and I've got fire extinguisher. It's just like, do you not have bricks or traffic cones, or what other objects are there available in London?
I think I'd be like embarrassed to sort of fend off someone with a narwhal tusk. I don't know. It's a bit.
I mean, it works like a spear. I'm just thinking it's an odd selection. It's like, how the hell do you get a narwhal tusk in the middle of bloody London?
Because like the narwhal tusk and the fire extinguisher, I mean, surely that symbolises the traditional classical elements of fire and water. which are again like also symbolised as the upward pointing and downward pointing triangles, like in
unless it is a okay, yeah, I was going to say that, but I've just got to be autistic and think like. But you can also get dry powder, fire extinguishers, as well as carbon dioxide.
An upward pointing and a downward pointing triangle. That reminds me of another shape.
Yeah. Well,
there's another
like a star shape.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say, but I didn't want to sort of.
Oh, is that where you were going? Sorry.
Well,
what a coincidence.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what. Yeah. I'll tell you what. I mean, the thing is, it's like he was released early from jail by a member of the coin clipping society, and
Justice Leveson. I see. Is that the same Justice Leveson who wants to stop papers telling the truth, or papers actually doing investigation and telling people what's actually going on in the world? Isn't that the same Leveson?
Well, sometimes the truth is hate speech, and that's unallowed. But the thing is like I now correct me if I'm wrong, chap, but he, as in the Alan Snackbarist, was at a seminar for tackling radicalization, and the guy which he killed was in the seminar leading it, saying like, you guys don't need to kill. If you kill, don't kill because killing's bad. Just think about having a chicken tikka masala instead. And so he was so incensed with just how boring the seminar was. It's like, right, I'm going to do a terrorism now. And then the Polish guy, attacked him, was also serving time and been released for murder.
He'd actually slit his girlfriend's throat, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Did he?
Yeah.
So the Nobel Tusk guy is a murderer, and he's like, he was also incensed by the seminar, and yeah.
What were they saying in this seminar to cause all this trouble?
Well, I'm thinking we need to close audit of these anti-radicalization seminars, because it seems that they cause radicalization to happen.
Well, I'm in all seriousness, I wouldn't dismiss the idea that there was some sort of mind control going on, because that Learning Together seminar was run by Cambridge University, and that's like occult weirdness espionage HQ, isn't it? Like Cambridge University. I mean, that's where the Cambridge Five were all educated, like the apostles who described themselves as a sort of gay Freemasonry and the higher sodomy, back in the 70s or wherever it was.
As opposed to totally heterosexual Freemasonry.
Yeah, I mean, Crowley went there, I mean, it's long been a recruiting ground, isn't it?
You just stay in this coffin and jerk off whilst telling us your sexual fantasies. No homo.
Yeah.
No homo.
Sort of sticking your dicks in a pig's mouth and all that, I mean, it's pretty odd.
It's totally not gay. We all do it. We're just going to take photographs. You're willy and that.
That's what I think they do. I think they do like gay sex, but I don't think they consider themselves to be gay. Like all these like coffin jerk off people, they have sex with each other. I think they see it as a sort of like a boxing game, or sort of maybe a bit of wrestling or something. I don't think they consider themselves gay.
You could imagine one of these down at the shrinks, couldn't you? Well, what it is, Doc, is I keep having sex with corpses. Imagine the psychiatrist says, these corpses, are they male or female? Are they male or female? Hold on a sec. Dog issues.
The dog does not like this line of questioning and just goes, it's irrelevant, they're corpses.
Anyway, the punchline is, are these corpses male or female? So the patient says, what do you think I am, queer?
Oh God, you're cutting out.
Oh dear.
The punchline is, are these... Carry on.
Is that better?
I don't know, is it?
Hello, people. Can you hear me clearly? Am I coming through clear?
I can hear myself through you.
Sounds better now, yeah.
That's all right then.
Oh God, he's disappeared.
No, I'm still here.
I want to hear the punchline of this joke.
Yeah, I want to know now.
And the dog's like, no, you're not telling this joke on the internet. No,
the dog and the internet are trying to stop me from saying this joke on the internet. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes, I can.
Go on, then what's the punchline?
Sorry. Anyway, punchline is the shrink then says to him, "These corpses, are they male or female?" So the bloke says, "What do you think I am, queer or something?"
Yeah.
It was a bit long time that punchline coming out, so I think that's what ruined the end of the joke.
But this thing, it takes place on a bloody bridge. I mean, a bridge is a liminal place, isn't it? It's neither here nor there. It crosses the worlds. And I found out.
Well, the arch. Well, if you
on it before.
Well, if you have a bridge, you have an arch, or some might say a royal arch.
Yeah. And the bridge ends suicides. What a name. What an apt name for like a hanging cluster. Bridge end. Like the bridge to the end for you lot. You know.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I found out the other day that the term pontiff, i.e. pope, comes from the Latin for bridge builder, i.e. from earth to heaven. So that might tie in with the old upward and downward pointed triangles. Or
in French, a bridge is a pont. So it's the same word.
All right, yeah. Oh, I'm trying to read this and think at the same time. All right, yeah. My great revelation. Oh, go on if you were going to say something.
Oh, no, it's not. I want to hear your revelation instead of what I was going to say.
My great revelation. Because there was another attack on London Bridge, wasn't there, in 2017? And between that first attack and this latest one, there was 909 days, not including the end date, from the first London Bridge terrorist attack to the next one. It's 909 days. And palindrome,
so that's 18, which means that's 9.
Oh, Cody in the chat. Cody in the chat said 2 women in charge of those seminars and a prisoner rehab program are being investigated now. At least they're investigating the program itself.
Yeah, I just read that bit, so it's good to relay it to the rest of the chat. Although the chat already knew it, so but now we know it as well.
909. I can't suss out what 909 is, other than it does add to 18, which is 6 plus 6,
which is your 3 6s. Yeah.
That's the surface code.
909. You add it together, you get 18. You get 9.
Yeah. Yeah, 9 or 6 plus 6 plus 6. Yeah.
So you got 9. Yeah. So if you've got 3 6s and 3 9s, they definitely do these spooky things. I mean, 7/7 bombings. Did you ever see that video about the 7/7 bombings? It was by a chap called Muad'Dib. I always remember it because of the name Muad'Dib is, from June.
I don't think I've seen that. I saw the David Shayler one.
Oh yeah, this was before David Shader. I think it was like region locked, so you couldn't watch it in the UK. But there was like a BitTorrent of it and other ways of getting it in the UK. It was a good documentary. It talked about all these weird happenings and
you cutting out a lot.
Drills,
you're chopping a bit.
Exactly the same thing. So a lot. Oh bugger! Well, let me repeat myself. There was a documentary about.
Do you want to drop out and come back in again? I think that might sort you out.
7 bombings, not particularly.
909. It's the palindrome number, and they're always showing up in these dark elite cult events. Like you got the 11:11 time style.
Hello, I'm here. Can you hear me?
That's better, loud and clear.
Yeah.
All right, good. So the 7/7 things. A lot of people are saying that there were some counter-terrorism drills with bombs and backpacks being done, and they suspect what happened is that a few of those drills actually went live, and this would have caused confusion at the time because the Metropolitan Police knew that was a counter-terrorism drill going on. So when reports came in of bombs going off, they wouldn't have reacted to it normally because they're just like, oh yeah, it's part of the drill, it's not real. Oh, it is real. Is he? Oh.
Well, that's supposed
They're
to be
all supposed to go off in tubes, but one of them went off in the buff.
That's supposed to be a common thread of all these things, isn't it? It's the fake. It's the drill that turns out to not be a drill, isn't it? Wasn't 9/11 the same?
Yeah, because NORAD had this thing where they were doing a bunch of drills with hijacked planes that day, and then, of course, when there's was it 3 or 4 planes became hijacked? Let me think. 2 went into New York City, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
1 went into the Pentagon, allegedly.
1 absolutely went into the Pentagon, no doubt whatsoever.
Oh yeah, sorry, but we to say otherwise would be a hate speech.
Yeah.
And then another one got brought down somewhere else. Who knows where that could have gone to?
Is that Pennsylvania, the other one, or is Pennsylvania the Pentagon?
Oh, I can't tell you. But back to 7/7, because I want to talk about London Bridge. They said, oh, it was all supposed to blow up on the tubes. Yeah, except the bus one that blew up had this theatre trailer for a thing which they said bold and stunningly brave or something like that, or biting. Do you remember what the poster said? It was like biting.
That was for the horror film The Descent, wasn't it? I think. I remember reading something like that. But when there was a Satan image on the bus as well, or am I getting that confused with something?
Well, I'm gonna do a bit of search through, see if anything comes up. 7/7.
Don't do 7/7 bus ad. That doesn't work.
No, 7/7 bus bombing picture. Let's just see if I get any images of the. Oh yeah, I can see it now. Outright terror, bold and brilliant.
Yeah.
I can't see anything more from that, but that was the. I can't even read the sign. It got blown out. Any other angles of that bus? But yeah, they do these things and they put it in plain sight. And I think when you got a poster on a bus which says "outright terror, bold and brilliant," 4 stars. I mean, they're just rubbing it in. It's like when Prince.
Mocking, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's like when Prince Andrew was doing that interview and says, "Oh no, I couldn't have possibly been doing that because I was at Pizza Express at the time." And I thought, yeah, all those people saying Pizzagate's not real, and you've got dog whistles like that. And I'm thinking to myself, they're rubbing it in.
I just think people in that level, like Prince Andrew and that, and they don't give a toss what like the peasants think, do they? I think. Even if they're like exposed, I mean, they're not going to lose their job, are they? Because
he's probably going to be more upset and worried about the bollocking he received from his mum and other family members.
Cool, yeah.
Then you probably one iota of that would be.
I don't know. He might have that
public concern.
He might have that Rothschild poking him in the chest, like happened to his brother.
All I got to say is, like, remember what happened to Diana, isn't they?
Yeah. Andy,
do
you want a weekend in Paris, mate?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We'll give you a driver and everything, nice chauffeur. Yeah, come on, Andy. Yeah, it'd be great.
It'll be fine. It'll be lovely.
We'll turn the CCTV off. That'd be great.
Yeah, you won't have anyone looking at you.
No working.
But this bloody 909, that's not a coincidence, because these palindrome numbers, they keep showing up, like 1111. That's a palindrome, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet.
Well, here's a question for you then. Have we missed 88? We've had 77. We're on 99. Is there an atrocity that's 88?
I didn't get any of that. You're getting really... Everyone's going choppy. Everyone's getting choppy.
I'm just with a keyboard and a hand.
This government rationed internet's not doing us any good. I think our guest has arrived.
Hello, our guest.
I didn't know that I needed an app, so.
Oh, hello, Jaefar. Yeah.
You don't necessarily need the app. You can just do it from a browser.
You could try turning your camera off to preserve some of the bandwidth as well.
No, it's not showing up. Oh, that reminds me. If I I'm already on audio for mine.
I'm on the hand, so I'm fine.
It's all right. None of this is being shown anyway, so because I use OBS.
That's true.
Jaefar, I've been lurking on your YouTube channel for about a year now, but I'm more of a lurker than a commentator. But I find your approach to, let's say, the esoteric in its widest sense very interesting. Because weren't you? What did you grow up Christian?
Yeah, I was raised Latter-day Saint.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and now you, I don't know, what would you sort of like? I hate to ask you, but what would you sort of describe yourself as? A magician?
Well,
An art?
that's an appropriate enough of a word, because if you define magic as the art and science of religion, or if you define it as willful changes in consciousness, those are both definitely things that I am involved in.
I was wondering, was it a sort of awkward move from like Christianity to magic? Because I was sort of Christian, but I was always more of into the magic sort of thing. But I don't know, what was it, like a really strict upbringing you had?
More on myself, but then again, there were some issues with me abandoning the church. Not that I had the money to do mission work, but yeah, that was kind of hoped of me. So,
do you think you're sort of born more of a magician sort of thing, or well, are people born magicians?
I think we all are in a sense. It's like we're meant to do things and achieve things for ourselves instead of vicariously rely on others and that sort of thing. So that's kind of programmed into us. But
yeah, that's the bane of my life. That is like,
and we can be, direct. We're meant to be direct. I hope too much didn't show up when I was setting up the camera.
Not really.
What's done is done.
No, like I say, this screen doesn't show up in chat, so you don't need to worry about any of that.
Okay.
I was tortured growing up, like with people telling me what to do. That caused me like great distress, and I always knew what they were saying wasn't the whole story, and I knew like magic was real, but at the same time, you're forced to obey, aren't you? Until you're sort of 18, I suppose. And it causes so much angst to loads of people. It's just awful, isn't it? This Western system.
Well, it's that sort of thing's much worse, and most of what you'd consider to be the East. Particularly like China. Of course, China, you can be whatever religion you want as long as it's in a Chinese garb.
Yeah, because I heard there's a Chinese version of Christianity which is state approved.
Yeah, state sponsored, isn't it? Yeah. It's a funny old world, isn't it?
Hmm.
But me, I 7 years old, I noticed there were issues with the Bible, and I figured either they had to be corrected or there was something else elsewhere. And the Joseph Campbell programs on the television kind of pointed me to look at a global approach, which Christianity really only presented itself as a global approach.
Yeah, I mean, I've been relying on the King James version for years, and I thought I'll use the King James version because people tell me that's the most accurate translation available. But later on, someone said, "Well, no, there's loads of errors in the King James Bible," and I thought, that was a waste of time.
Well, the thing that I never figured out growing up was that there's over 100 different King James versions of the Bible, and particularly these ones that say they're faithful to the 1611. They're shorter than the other King James version of the Bible, and there's some other changes. So, it's not quite just changing words to be more modern words.
Yeah.
Of course, they really don't do that either, but
So you're telling me that what the Bible I should have is definitely the Schofield Reference Bible?
I actually don't have that one, so I don't have an opinion.
I'm being sarky because that's the one which is sort of very pro-Zionist and does a lot of historical revisionism, which I don't support.
Well, there's one thing in that particular category that there's over 200 verses that kind of dictate that biblical Zionism is not some blood and soil movement that, it even excludes Jerusalem as far as being required as a part of the whole thing. But there's one verse in the Bible that they hearken on, and they mistranslate some other ones, like they mistranslate Isaiah 40, verse 1, Nechmu wa Nechmu Ami, which means regret and repent, and you'll be my people. That's different than what they usually tell you it means. They usually tell you that it means some sort of some unconditioned comforting of who the people are, and then, of course, the people are Israel. But it's interesting, the Jews don't really have... Genetic studies have kind of indicated, Simon Yakubovich and some others have kind of indicated that even over 95% of the Jews don't have any Semitic ancestry whatsoever, so that thing's out the window too.
Not too sure about there, because, I hear certain stories one way or another. I just get to the point where I don't know what to believe. All I know is just that they're fairly nepotistic and insular group, and they seem to have their best interests at heart, even if it's at the detriment of everybody else.
Yeah. I definitely don't agree with the modern state of Israel. How either the oppression or how many people they've killed, or the idea that
you know how like some criminals have a safe house which they hide out until things, they lay low there until things blow over. It's like kind of that, but it's a nation state.
It's just
it's interesting to see that some of these individuals that are prominent and powerful Jews that were alive during the World War II era actually were on the Nazi side, but that's kind of a different point. But it's interesting, by creating the state of Israel, you gave the place a lot of enemies. The Zionist movement, when it started back in the 1880s and stuff, it started as a Christian thing to kind of shove off the Jews to a different area, kind of purify the Christian lands of their presence. But
because,
it kind of I don't agree with that way of phrasing it, but
no, I know why you're saying it, because I just want to say that the Jews have been forcibly relocated before in the past, and the Russians tried to do it with the Jewish Autonomous Oblast in the far eastern part of the country. And this is something which is not really discussed that often, but Hitler was moving Jews into Palestine, and there was this... you ever seen that coin? It's got a Star of David on one side and a swastika on the other. I'd like to hold one of those coins at one time.
One of the things is Palestine being an ancient insult for that they sort of that the early Jews came up with. It wasn't really there was no kingdom of Palestine. It basically means the Tun in Palestine is like the female Satan, which links to Tiamat and some other things. But the thing is that the first people to call themselves Palestinians in the modern era were Jews that had the ideal that at some point we're going to slough off this title to our enemies. And the thing that happened in creating that state is that at least in some of the Muslim majorities, it shifted from time to time. The Jews could at least flee the whatever persecution that arose and go over there, but it kind of made it that the state of Israel kind of made that not work anymore. So if they ever lose their $2 trillion of American funding a year and their trillion of British funding a year, and they have some money from elsewhere, but that's pretty much it. If they lose that, the state's going to easily be, well, not easily, but it would be devoured if that was ever the case.
Yeah, because it's in addition to the funding as well, it's also, the material age of American bodies defending it.
I don't want to throw a curveball here, but I've always suspected that Zionism is actually a plot by the British royalty and Royal Arch Freemasonry. I think they're using the Jews because like the whole basis of Royal Arch Freemasonry, who, if people don't know, they consider themselves to be the elite branch of Freemasonry. Their whole thing is the rebuilding of the temple, isn't it? And I think maybe they're using the Jews to get to do the dirty work and actually rebuild the temple. And then I think the British royals are going to move in there, and that's my theory anyway.
But well, two interesting things about the temple thing is that one, every time it looks like they can do it, they figure out a way to make it stricter and not do it. So in one sense, they don't want to do it, but in another sense, you could say, well, wasn't this done in about 660 or something like that? That they are 650s or something like that century, when it was actually the Temple Mount was kind of cleaned up because it had become what's the word for trash yard? But anyways, it was cleaned up and basically reinstituted as a temple, but for everyone, and people could join as long as they weren't doing something, they weren't allowed to wander the hill naked or something. But other than that, pretty much any faith could show up and do their thing on the mount.
But this thing about when they rebuild it, like now, the idea is out there that the Messiah is going to appear. But do you think some sort of Messiah was around back in those times when it was cleaned up, or?
Well, that was one of the things that was thought about the ruler that had done, the caliph that had done that in a way, but not, the Messiah way of thinking is something sort of unique to the Christian. If you look in what's called the Old Testament, you don't really have that meaning of it. It's not one figure. It's sort of the high priest of the land sort of thing, or the leader of the land that sort of has a spiritual consciousness to him. That's really it. So I guess they could say that such was a Messiah figure, but
it just seems odd to me that the supposed holiest place on earth, or to Westerners and Americans and Christian Zionists, seems to be quite a bit of a war zone, really, that doesn't really fit, does it? I would have thought there wouldn't be like war and bloodshed and strife and angst going on at the holiest place on earth, but I can't.
Well, things have another side, but you kind of do see a difference with what happened. It's like if you've ever heard of the Karamites, there was a sort of extreme Shia group that attacked Mecca, and for a few decades or something, the stone was gone. They hit the building and they wandered off with the stone, and so it wasn't returned for a while. But it didn't stop anything. But the things that have happened in Jerusalem have kind of stopped the temple activity. I mean, if they really believed it was the holy place, without the priests, they could just show up on the hill and do their stuff. But things went different there than it went in certain locations. I think the Native Americans, certain tribes would they had ideas about particular places, but they carried on their traditions outside those places when they were kicked out, or the buildings or whatever that was on there got destroyed in the scuffle and whatnot. They could still do what they did.
And there's the ancient Greek theory of the omphalos, isn't there? The sort of sacred stone at the center of I don't know, I suppose a temple, or not Delphi? A temple, not necessarily in a physical sense, but the center of the community or the area. But it just seems like Jerusalem. I'm echoing a bit. I'll turn my headphones down. Jerusalem just seems to be like a generator of dark negative forces, really, because the Jews are completely surrounded by people who absolutely hate them and want to destroy them. So it seems to be acting like a sort of a dynamo or a generator of dark negative forces, which these supposed non-human beings feed upon. Because when you get into conspiracy theories and things like that, and it always seems to come back to sort of dark, negative, non-human forces, doesn't it? It just seems.
Of course, the thing I think with stuff like that is that, you know, these beings, they have a certain level of consent of the human beings. Sometimes it's not direct. Sometimes one door is open that shouldn't have been open, but it's not quite, and it allows something else per se to use that door. That. But I think it's certain beliefs and actions that allow certain other things to happen. Sometimes sometimes like an avalanche is set off when, all you did was use a pickaxe on one tiny little spot.
So what do you? I know this is a big question, but what do you think is really going on, like in this world? Say, like on I suppose an esoteric level, but do you think we're, I don't know, well, what do you think's really going on? Are we in a sort of like eternal battle, good versus evil kind of thing?
Well, yes and no. Sometimes it's not per se about good and evil. It's just about more and more people don't care about that per se, and that so much of the violence isn't really associated with spirituality anymore comparatively, but it's, people have agendas, and it's all about piling up one's wealth in one way or another by, and not limiting it to principles, and therefore.
But this elite cult, they seem to be in league with dark forces, don't they? I mean, Epstein and all this stuff, unless it's just some sort of like big media psyop and all they're really interested in is making money. But I think there is more.
Well, there are people, it's like with the issue of prostitution. If you're willing to sell yourself, you're willing to sell yourself, if just because you set the price higher, or set the price, in terms of spiritual things. It's like you hear of these people that now the Illuminati is, the 1700s Illuminati. That's nothing like what these people say, but the idea gets released. William Guy Carr and some other figures like that put this idea out into the public, and I think people use that as a scam in one way, like the old phony magicians that just acted like they were doing something spiritual to have some sort of control over the people, and maybe some people who actually are using it in that context that go around and, what was it, Lady Gaga in some back alley after a show, some guy muttered some words, and basically she thought later that was her initiation after she got famous. Not that she did shows around New York and stuff. So there's people that get into those parties and, they play their game, but I don't think a lot of that is really part of some major organization, although there is some. I mean, Epstein, he wasn't the president at the time, but the fact that 15 years after they basically proved that he had raped like 4 or 5 people, I don't remember which one it was, but 4 or 5 people, they basically had all the proof 15 years before they charged him. Not even the prostitution thing, that's something different, something much less, but in my opinion. But he obviously had connections going to British royalty and billionaires and millionaires and celebrities and a lot of people.
I think like a black magic cult is certainly entwined within show business and just general higher levels of political power. Like
there is certain stuff once you get money or other connections that you have that you per se have an opportunity to be exposed to have firsthand knowledge of that you wouldn't have otherwise. It's like there are parties that you spend a massive amount of money, and people get and people get killed. And what happened in my country a few years back was that I don't remember how many. It was hundreds of people that were detained. They don't know what happened to them. They're just off the list. They weren't deported. They were just, I guess, sold into slavery by the government officials that had a control over that.
Not the Finders cult, was it? Not the Finders cult. Oh, that was children, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure exact names, but I do remember them saying that they had that a certain number of hundreds of the detainees from the from the immigration control had just gone missing.
Because we've talked on the show before about ambush hypnosis, which is also known as covert hypnosis, which apparently criminals use it a lot in Russia, is where one or two people will just suddenly not creep up, but just speak to someone and sort of almost hypnotize them instantly. And people have done it. People have walked into banks and done their special thing, and they've got the bank teller to sort of hand them over loads of money. And I mean, that's terrifying. If the government or whatever, who have the power and the inclination to sort of study stuff like that, I mean, if they can they could just literally whisk people off the street.
Well, I figure with the right brain waves, that would be a more effective thing if you had a little device with you to operate that sort of thing, to kind of put people in the state without them quite knowing it.
I've had read stories in South America. They've got a drug. I'm not sure if it's scopolamine or brugmansius, something like that, where they blow it into people's faces, this powder. It takes away their free will, and they just walk up to cash machines and clear out their account. People quite willingly put their PIN number in, withdraw money, and then hand it to their assailant.
Yeah, I've read stuff about that. Yeah, that's just totally odd. But I mean, but back to this sort of show business black magic stuff. I mean, I think this has been going on since at least the 1960s. I don't know if you know about it, Jaefar, but over here there was a big scandal called the Profumo scandal in 1961, where our big wig sort of British Secretary of State for War, Jack Profumo, they were all meeting at this Cliveden house on the banks of the River Thames, and you had the British Secretary of State for War, Jack Profumo, and then you had these call girls. You had this sort of fixer type guy called Stephen Ward, and you also had a Russian KGB naval attaché, sort of all meeting for sort of jolly fun around the swimming pool at this Cliveden house. And Cliveden House was owned by the Astor family, Astor, which to me is like Twilight language for Astor, Aster, as in the Star family. And
which is actually how some people would render Esther, because it really is an Aleph Semic Tau. But was it Scotland? The Connolly family was kind of connected to nobility. Basically it was sort of a cult that was run there hundreds of years ago, and some of the tradition has made its way into the Americas. I'm not sure to what extent, but
I haven't heard of that. The Connolly family. I hadn't heard of that. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. Yeah,
but some big old castle on a hill. I mean, that doesn't narrow it down as much as I would hope, but
because I mean, there's actual people have written memoirs, and they were saying all this Cliveden Profumo stuff. There was black magic sex parties going on there, not hedonistic sort of swinger parties, but actual worshipping phalluses,
I'd say the hedonism was that it wasn't a swinger party, because hedonism is you regard the consequences. But yeah, Crowley was definitely not the person who started the idea of sex magic in the West.
No, definitely not. Because this Cliveden house is on the banks of the River Thames. It's like the major river that runs through London. And like a few years ago, one headless and limbless torso of a black boy was like found in the Thames, and the police investigated and was saying like, that was to do with voodoo or some sort of black magic. But previously to that, about 5 or 6 like headless and limbless torsos were found in the River Thames, and at the actual time of Jack the Ripper. So, the River Thames seems to be a place where like ritual sacrifices are made, and this Cliveden house is on the banks of the River Thames, and this Stephen Ward guy, he rented the cottage which was adjacent to the house, and after he committed suicide in inverted commas, his cottage by the banks of the Thames had to be exorcised by the leading Roman Catholic exorcist of the time, like Dom Robert Petit Pierre, and his cottage had to be exorcised because the next tenant who moved in committed suicide by drowning himself in the kitchen sink, and that's fact. I mean, that is bizarre stuff.
It is apparent that there was human sacrifice in various. I mean, pretty much all over. And as a side note to the Jerusalem thing, it's interesting that that's one of the longest inhabited areas, because Neanderthal actually lived in the Jerusalem area. But so, some stuff, I guess, human sacrifice cults, those kind of need to be persecuted, don't they? But some stuff became more sinister because it was kind of forced underground and combated with this teaching that like everything that wasn't Christian was like super evil. And so people trying to revive things sometimes made things more evil than they were, and people didn't quite remember things. It's like a lot of the grimoires, the Goetia and the Grimorium Varium stuff, aside from jumbling the language, some of it put a darker mask on some of what was previously said about these entities.
And it's like, what if the sacrificial victim is a willing victim, and that puts a sort of whole new spin on it, which is what was going on back with the Druids. Like, they weren't, like the Romans said, they sacrificed humans, but maybe they weren't sacrificing.
A lot of that was joyfully going to the sacrifice.
Yeah,
like, that was like, like it was a more standard form of martyrdom.
But back to this cottage I just mentioned, I just got to get this in, that after this guy committed suicide in there by drowning himself, it's not funny, but he drowned himself in the kitchen sink, which I just find totally bizarre. But after that and the exorcism, guess who leased that cottage for 21 years? It was Stanford University, like whose research, Stanford Research Institute, they were the ones who were doing the remote viewing experiments with Russell Targ and Harold Puthoff. I mean,
Stanford also did the prison experiment, didn't they?
Yeah, but of all the people to rent that haunted, horrible cottage where probably demons were everywhere, of all the people to rent it for a 21-year lease, that was Stanford Research Institute who were doing all the remote viewing stuff funded by the CIA. I mean, that's just insane. So I think, so you go back to it all,
and a less sinister sense, going back to the free. Well, I mean, it's more sinister when it's just a bunch of rich elite with the men's club, the Freemasons kind of combining a bunch of builder mythologies and stuff like this. That didn't really go quite to the point that some of these other clubs. I think the Skull and Bones is a lot more sinister than the Freemasons, but you know, they definitely would have enacted things, at least for the dramatic effect of it. You know, you can't all be frat boys spanking each other to see who will take the most, and okay, you can join because you handled it.
Cool, Hobbit. You can say something, Hobbit.
What?
Has everyone gone?
Hello.
Is everyone like?
Hello, am I here?
Yeah,
Good.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, we can all hear you. Do you have a question, Hobbit?
You mentioned Skull and Bones, and I mentioned about Freemasons earlier. The jerking off in a coffin and telling the other frat boys your sexual fantasies. That's a thing from Skull and Crossbones, and I got that from Alex Jones.
That's what I said. I was saying as well. Like, I think they do have like homosexual sex, but in a strange way. I don't think they consider themselves to be homosexual. I think it's kind of I don't know. I can't explain it because they have wives and that, didn't they? And I don't think they are homosexual, are they?
Well, traditionally, I mean, there were certainly exceptions, but the idea of homosexuals as people who only had gay sex and that was it for their whole life, that's not, you know, that's only recently been the thing that's how we think of homosexuals. So
yeah.
Or do you think it was because homosexuality
the Greeks weren't all gay either, but yeah, definitely there were people closer to that, you know, thinking women is okay. We go to the women to breed, but for the men, you know, but.
Well, what I was going to say is, do you think it was because that homosexuality used to be a massive taboo, but it's kind of lessened now, and that's why it's gone into like child molesting instead? Do you think it's blackmail material?
Well,
yeah.
Some people feel like they need to go to certain extremes, and it's like nothing physically criminal or anything like that. People feel just as damn. There are rituals that people go through, and you know they hit that point, and it's the you know like the Lucifuge Raphael pacts. You know the sort of accounts you hear of people with that, whether it's in person or whatever. There's a breakthrough that those people have that most people would never get without, you know, killing someone or molesting a child or something like that. And some people probably just feel like they need to be naughty or perverted or something to that degree, and that's how they feel they would do it. I've had people contact me questioning about, okay, do I need to kill my family, and how would I, and is there any particular thing that I have to do when I'm doing this? And I'm like, really, that's where you're going to first? But
well, they want to sell their soul to Satan, kind of thing.
Yeah, and they think that's initially what they have to do. And
see, I'm not sure one can sell one's soul. I don't think it's for sale. But
you know, I see I've long experienced myself as a spiritual entity, but initially I only believed it, you know, till I was 18. But you know, yeah, you can't, the spiritual being that you are, spirit, soul, whatever you want to call it, you know, it's entirely you. That's one of the tricks, is that entities that would want to control you, human or otherwise, could convince you that there's literally a point of no return. And I think as long as we're alive, we can repent, or however you want to phrase that.
Because it seems to me like the whole thing, whether you're a mystic or a Christian or a Muslim or whatever, I mean, it seems like the whole key to initiation is entering what could be called the poetic visionary state. And why people seem to think they have to go to these sort of really extreme things to do it, rather than just sitting quietly in a room and doing it. I don't know.
Well, one thing that I have involved myself within, although this is secondary, because definitely there's intentions of devotion and stuff like this that is mixed with it, or else it would get really boring. It's like affirmations when they're completely unspiritual. There's a reason why they're actually less effective, or you have to do more to be effective, is because there's not quite the whole package you're putting into it. But I found that, I mean, I've been in the needles in the hospital, that sort of thing. So I know what some serious drug level experiences are like. And I mean, without that feeling, if you've ever had just a little bit too much painkiller or something, it feels really good, but it's still like you're being slightly forced. But when it's your body working with those chemicals, we have over 50 chemicals that run through our body that produce any sensual or psychiatric high that one could look at. But you don't have to use drugs, but people, again, go into those extremes with drugs to reach a certain point. And I understand why some people get so high that they basically ruin their lives trying to once a year get that high again.
Yeah. I'm pretty convinced that, I don't know whether it's DMT, but I mean, I can seem to, I used to do rituals and things like that, but then I realized, well, the whole point of doing a ritual is to get into this visionary state. So why don't I don't have to do the ritual. Why don't I just get into this visionary state? And I'm not like tooting my horn here, but I've found that I've been doing it for many years, but now I find myself, if I want to get into the visionary state, I just call it just doing it. I can just do it, just enter it. And I don't know what I'm trying to say really, but
well, particularly with techniques and stuff, it comes much easier. It's like the first time I kind of mixed what I would define as the soma state, because it kind of reminded me of all those poems in the Rig Veda and stuff about the soma and the Persian mentions of the Heoma, which is actually, I think, there is a recipe with 40 different plants they put in the thing, but basically the opium, the ephedra, and the marijuana, that type of experience. It took me months to get to that point where I could have that experience, but after that, it was like pretty much guaranteed. I go through these steps, I'm going to have something. But of course, I'm a person who wants to maintain the context, and it's like I can more reliably have it.
But like, do you do mantras or visualizations, or do you just sort of like network your mind and just sort of like click into the state? Because whether I'm deluding myself, I don't know. But
I don't know entirely what you mean by that. But I would say one of the ways to have some of these experiences is to figure out and follow the pathways that the chemical reactions.
I mean, maybe I may have temporal lobe epilepsy or something. Maybe it's something like that. But I just find I think like everyone probably does it. It's like, I think like our prehistoric ancestors, I don't think that wasn't like a case of them doing magic to get into that state. I think that was just the state of consciousness that we all had back then. So I don't think it's anything. I'm not saying like I'm an amazing magician that I can do it. I'm just doing what's in my DNA. That.
Well, some of the things, it's like, okay, maybe they had beliefs and they did stuff, but the techniques got worked out and turned into things for themselves. It's like music, I think, started as a mystical thing, and it became sort of an entertainment thing, and it's lost a lot of its effect if it's kept in that category. But it's like the scrying thing, looking at reflective pools and various other things having different effects that maybe the shiny reflective ones don't. I think that's just people were calm enough that they could actually sit in one place and look, and then they'd.
But all this stuff's within us, isn't it? It's encoded in our DNA. So I think we can just literally flick a switch and just turn on these unused brain circuits. And I mean, that's the whole psychedelic thing, isn't it? Timothy Leary and all that. But yeah. But now to change the subject slightly, I'm thinking, well, what's the point of magic really? Like, isn't it just like anything else? It's like, it's just moving the building blocks of existence around in a sort of slightly different arrangement. So I'm thinking, like, maybe it's best not to. Maybe not. It's not probably best not to do anything. But I don't. I'm not sure what.
If I can take you back to drugs for a second, do you think all of the massive amounts of like cannabis use at the moment could actually bring something forth, with all these people that are in these states where they're kind of open to the spirit world and stuff like that?
Well, there's certain physical and psychiatric risks to the secularization of drug use that aren't not that I'm saying sorcery in terms of ritual drug use is necessarily what everybody should be going down or anything like that, although I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. Personally don't do it, but yeah, there's doorways that are opened with, you know, all sorts of drugs. It's like there are people that they don't per se know it, but they hear the wrong song when they're drunk. You never know what they're going to do. But otherwise, you know, they could resist trying to act out the song.
Yeah, and it's like, how many Ouija board sessions happen every day across the world? Like, I don't know, 10,000? Say 10,000 serious Ouija board sessions happen every day across the world. I mean, that's got to be letting something in from elsewhere.
Well, the thing about that, though, is it's like basically letting whatever in to say and do whatever it wants with you is, you know, yeah, that's got to have a level of risk to it, and possibly less reward to it than a lot of other practices.
Do you have any good Ouija board stories, or are you a partaker of the Ouija? Or because we're scared of it over here, none of us here would ever do it. We're freaked out by it.
This show is anti-Ouija board, aren't we?
Well, the Alethus Levi said that a sage doesn't consult the oracle; he controls it. So, I mean, I do let myself go per se in speech in other ways, and to me, that's really more or less what the Ouija board is. But to me, the idea of just calling on whatever to do whatever, and yeah, there is no real story of me doing that sort of thing. But you know, it's like a keyboard. You can get into the visionary state and follow the light around that appears.
This is what fascinates me, because a computer keyboard does look quite similar to a Ouija board, doesn't it? And I think Ouija boards are a special case simply because the actual letters of the alphabet are on the actual oracle board itself, and I think there's power in the English language. I mean, that's another whole subject, but I think the Ouija board is a special case, and that's why it's so
version of your old stuff. You know, the trumps from the tarot, or various systems. I mean, the runes. You know, that wasn't the first thing alphabet that people shuffled around and tried to get a message of, and where there wasn't a alphabet that we think of, there could have been patterns and knots, or the shells followed this pattern, that sort of thing.
But they had to be interpreted, though, didn't they? That's the difference. That's the difference with the Ouija board. The Ouija board's very specific, isn't it?
It seems to be very effective, doesn't it? As opposed to other systems, like the Ouija board has got a certain aura about it. I think it's to do just with the actual physical letters being on the board. I think there's something in it. As I was saying before, or when
the spiritism of the 1700s and not 1700s, the 1800s, and you know, outside of that, I guess, definitely gave sort of a thought form connection to the whole thing, and therefore there's, I mean, with the movies in particular, the Ouija board's something that gets a lot more attention than it might otherwise, but it's easy enough of a theme to work with. So It's just something that's just happened to build on itself like that.
I might have to pluck up the courage and do one day. I'm not sure, but see, now I'm thinking. Now we've brought up Ouija boards. I'm like thinking like another thing I was thinking of lately. Like when someone does magic, like is it done by the direct imposition of the human will, or is all magic done on our behalf by spirits and demons? Like,
well, whether you look at drug studies or consciousness studies, there is somewhat of the factor that's out of control of even the context of the whole thing. So
yeah, the spectacular results are certainly hard to explain. Like,
but who was it? Who was it? Confucius that talked about ritual as something done to establish character or to maintain character. And I think if that factor is there, it fixes a lot of the issues that might otherwise be associated with magic.
Because it always fascinates me that like the mainstream media probably isn't going to address this anyway, but there never seems to be like serious discussion, like not necessarily in mainstream media of just communicating with spirits. Like people do it all over the world, but it doesn't. It's almost like brushed under the carpet, isn't it? It's just like because I've been seeing spirits since I was a child, but.
Or if you see it on a news program, you get the spooky music and the giggling from the presenters, don't you? It's never treated with any kind of seriousness, is it?
I mean, do you work with spirit? I don't want to get too personal here, but like, do you communicate with spirits, don't you?
There are beings that I've spoken to or otherwise.
It's just such a
once I was aware of them. But I think a lot of the things it's like, most languages. Okay, first of all, it's like angel in English means a lot of things. You kind of really don't know what people mean half the time when they do say something like that. But okay, so the general mythology is you have three types of created beings: light beings, fire beings, and clay beings. And of course, the clay beings with the choices are the humans who have reached the proper age too. But the idea that the so-called fallen angels is appropriate enough of a term because supposedly they all made a mistake. But that doesn't mean they're like evil forever. But the thought of a lot of people is like they're evil forever, and that's where a lot of the taboo comes. Is like it's like there's a created class of demons, and that's not quite the thing.
But who creates these?
What?
Who creates all these tables of demons and hierarchies of demons? I mean, did someone just sit down one day and sort of make it up, or?
Well, there is certainly some of that, and that's one of the fads nowadays. Is countless grimoires of how to, method manuals to deal with spirits, and it's like, some of it's they just rearrange the, Cornelius Agrippa's method.
Because if what people are calling up is just like a thought form that was invented, say, 200 years ago, I mean, that's not going to be very productive, is it? If they're just like communicating.
Certain things can be attracted and repelled. It's like I've pointed out how the Necronomicon, which was probably the first thing in terms of a grimoire that I was physically exposed to. Basically, my knowledge of Akkadian and Sumerian and Assyrian and such kind of showed that, okay, maybe it could be a representative, but it definitely, the people who say, oh, we translate it from this, didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't translated from Akkadian or anything like this. Anybody with even a review level of that language, not even knowing how to read it yet, you're going to figure out that, yeah, that's not quite the thing, but it does represent something that someone could have believed. And that in particular gave it a little more power than just some random thing made up. But I've seen, like, for example, some videos on some demonic language, and this language the guy doesn't know what the words mean, and he doesn't know, what it looks like per se, just some transliterated letters. And if he can't explain how the language operates,
yeah, maybe it's just like a download from his subconscious or something that just.
Well, there is stuff like that. Interestingly enough, I had an experience like that. I think it was a summer solstice, and I wrote down the letters. There were 343 letters, I think. And basically, when I wrote them down in the order that sometimes you remember things that it's like, how did I remember all that? And you're sitting there, and you actually got the pattern but I followed it, and it turned out to be the 49 Anglorum Bonorum names from the Enochian system. It's like I wasn't even working with that, and there it was in my manual that I've, after I had it written down, there it was, and there was other things associated with that, but
it's not your demoniacas. I can't pronounce it right. Your demoniacas vum language, is that something else? Is
it? That's something else. A couple years ago, I started having dreams and senses, and I started writing it down. And initially, I gave it that name, which by now I should start calling it Lizuvama, because Lizu is the word for demon. Initially it was associated with a bunch of demons, the Goetian stuff, and that was the initial usage of it. It became initiatic names in certain online groups I was using, but which I didn't have the numbers at the time, so I just used English numbers. But I mean that thing's in accordance to intentions, really. If one wants to be a devotee of whichever entity that you're referring to, okay. If you're going to be a karcist, okay. If you're going to be an exorcist, you can be an exorcist. And I've done exorcism work, both mostly self exorcism, but I went to this temple of Baal. This is probably the biggest example, I think, but I didn't know it was there. I went to this park, and there was this like feeling around the corner, this sinister sort of something's going on down there. And we get down there, and the sigil of balls all over these trees. I've never seen anything like it. 7 different trees. There were symbolic little etchings in the patterns in the bark. There was this pit which was attracting a bunch of black birds, which made us worry about someone left an offering or something. I don't know what was. We found out what the offering was when since we were there, we wanted to make sure that if something was done but anyways, we recited, we went around, and it's like the thing cleared to a point where it's like I never felt it clear like that before. But when it's not when it's a person, it's a lot harder, because really it's you establish something different. That's all you're doing with an exorcism of place. But a person, you got to convince them of something, or you got to get them to go along with it somehow. It's not just standing over them and by the power invested in me. I don't know if that's what you'd say, but because I don't really remember the Roman Rite or other forms aren't quite coming to my mind at the time. But when it's a person, you got to have them kind of go with it a bit. And I've seen exorcisms with it of that sort, but
that'd be very disappointing if all this magic stuff turns out to be just humans. Like, not that can't be like very effective, but I'm not so sure whether all these spirits and so-called demons are just bad humans who've passed over and somehow just acquired more power, kind of thing. Because about the most evil thing I've ever encountered was when I was messing with the Goetia, and I called up this demon, and things got pretty violent. But I just got the feeling that you're not a demon, like you're just some evil human spirit, kind of thing. But or maybe some ancient chieftain or
it happens through you, but do you mind saying which one it was?
Oh, that's the thing, that I didn't actually call it up. I had the Jimmy Page edition, the 1975 edition of the Goetia, and I was very young at the time. I must have only been about 14, and I didn't do any rituals or anything. I was just looking at the sigils, you know, the page with all the sigils on it, and what am I trying to say? I didn't do any rituals, whatever. So I'm thinking, like, when someone looks at these sigils, I think the demon or the entity, whatever, knows that the human is looking at them, and I think I must have just made a connection somehow. And I went to sleep. I wasn't trying to call anything up. I was just looking through the book, and I went to sleep later that night, and I woke up in the middle of the night, you know, at 3 a.m. as often happens, and I just heard the beating of wings, like the beating of large wings, sort of vroom, vroom, vroom. And then something landed. My bedroom was in the loft, and something landed on the tiles on the loft, and I could hear claws. I know this is getting a bit Lovecraftian, but I was hearing claws scratching on the tiles on my roof, and I just thought, what the hell's going on here? What have I done? And then it clicked that must have been me looking at these Goetia symbols. And so I was lying in bed.
One of the things that so many people don't realize. It's like okay, the Grand Grimoire and some Lucifuge Pact. It really starts, you know, at the start. As soon as one's intentions or beliefs open that door, and the things, you know, I believe there are things that witness, and they may decide, okay, we notice that he's into this stuff. Let's start something.
Well, they were testing me, you know, but after that happened, that was it. I gave up. You know, that's too much for me. I was only like 14. I couldn't handle that sort of stuff. But again, I'm not sure whether it was a demon or just some sort of evil human who's acquired power somehow on another realm. I really don't know, because we don't know, do we? We don't know whether these things are non-human ancient entities or fallen angels, or whether they're just humans, really. Because I mean, the effects.
Well, that's the problem.
Be done by either, couldn't it?
That's the problem, isn't it? There's only one way to find out, and it's a one-way trip, isn't it? So there's no way of letting people know.
I mean, the effects, like say, knocking over a cup or something, that could be caused by a fallen angel, or it could have been caused just by some sort of violent human spirit. I'd be very disappointed if it was all just like horrible humans on the astral plane, like just messing with us, having a joke with us, and I don't know.
Well, in a way, I would say that's true, because again, it's the humans have to be the Nexion for these things, and therefore, I mean, to have the material and otherwise evil, you know, the human has to, you know, either be it itself or give something else the power to use it for that. And, you know, so, you know, as I said, you know, you evoke yourself when when one's doing these rituals, and other things, you know, they have their choices, and or maybe their programs or whatever, and you know, it's not entirely up to you what they decide to do.
It's like what you just said. Like if you open your mind to it, like you will get noticed. I mean, and that happens with the UFO phenomenon, doesn't it? People start getting into UFOs, and all of a sudden, it's almost like the UFOs have noticed that person getting into it, and they start showing themselves, and maybe they get abducted, and it's a very strange thing. I know a lot of it is like psychological warfare, and Whitley Strieber programming people to go down certain routes, but I don't think that explains all of it, does it?
Well, there, a lot of it, I would. Okay, he had epilepsy. That's one thing you can say. But there's, I think, in certain states that people are more likely to be exposed to things, and now it's a technological vision in a different sense than than it used to be. So it's beings from other planets coming flying to see us. And I mean, if you look at the ancient alien stories, well, they can't quite be physical beings because of some of what's said. You know, hanging out of spaceships going millions of miles an hour, even, you know, that quite doesn't work. So I, you know, a lot of things are just relabels.
Have you ever been abducted or anything like that? Or?
Well, something somebody could call a UFO, and I guess there were a couple experiences that our little little gatherings in Mount St. Helens. You know, there's this there's the 8 caves there, and anyways, we were the people, I guess, in the area that if anybody knew of somebody going on a meditation trip, it was. I mean, we didn't do it too much, but I you know. But we, you know, we saw sometimes like what you'd think it would be a flying saucer, but it didn't quite have a physical presence. It was like something else. It was standing before a giant airplane or something. It was different, but it was.
Yeah, I've just had crazy things. Like I remember, I was living in a sort of, not, I wouldn't say a haunted house. I was living in a house in Wales where sort of we used to see like red and like that. And one night I was asleep, and then I had this very clear dream of like this really ridiculous like 1950s B movie flying saucer that sort of like flew across in front of my vision. You could almost see the string that was like moving it. That was just ridiculous. And I was looking at this saucer and I was saying, this is ridiculous. But then it shot like a laser beam out from itself into my solar plexus. And I suddenly thought, well, this is getting a bit strange. And then I felt myself being levitated off the floor for about 6 inches. And then I thought, and I sort of like cut it off, and I sort of woke up. And I've had sort of like just really crazy stuff like that, which is, I don't know whether it's real or not, but I don't know. Because I had lots of like experiences.
Well, there's different sorts of real. It's like, I don't know if you've ever experienced with any of these things, but you know, there's a
what's that?
What?
What's the earthquake experience?
Well, I guess maybe most dramatic was when I didn't realize that there was an earthquake. And you know, I was in Washington State, and I thought to get up and you know, perform an extra little horizon in the middle of the night. And I didn't know that the slight little trembling that was going on. I mean, it wasn't the California level of earthquake that I was exposed to when I was in California, but yeah, I didn't know that it was actually an earthquake.
Yeah.
But you know, in the middle of my praying in the middle of the night, it was, you know, things rumbled, and I just didn't know that it was a physical thing. But I don't think it really happened per se the other way around, because I kind of knew that it wasn't.
Yeah, who knows what? I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Really, it's just a funny old world, isn't it? I wonder. I suppose what I want to know is what's really going on. Like, we're not going to know, are we? I don't think. But
well, I think with practice, we can kind of distinguish between different levels of reality. It's like, okay, when it comes to these spiritual things or even psychiatric things, you kind of, if you know that that's what they are, well, maybe that's, you know, the awareness isn't shared with others. And sometimes it's like you have a sense that something happened, and you kind of, in that respect, but you weren't consciously aware of it. And I met this well, I guess things can be translated into Enochian or whatever, but I met this Enochian entity called the Voltea. strange little blobby thing it was. You can't quite describe its colors, but I mean, I kind of did to an extent, but it told me it was going to come back and tell me a series of calls or verses or something associated with each of the names that it had mentioned. And as far as I know, I never encountered the entity again, but that doesn't mean it didn't show up and I just didn't have the awareness to be aware, to make note of it.
Yeah, that's I've completely lost my train of thought now.
But it's like Carl Gustav Jung said of a patient. She said there was a spirit snake in her, and she wanted to cut open her belly to remove the thing. And Jung said, "I don't have the authority to say whether or not she's actually experiencing this, but we can't let her do that."
Yeah.
So,
because I suppose like the actual brain networks of Magick and say psychosis, they're either very similar networks that we use to experience these things, or they're the very same networks. So, and I've always found it interesting that like psychiatric drugs have very similar names to the demons in the medieval grimoires. So I don't know whether there's something going on there.
But I've never thought of that,
yeah.
But it could be the case. I have the case of that sort. The Sworn Book of Honors or something like this. I was flipping through the TV, and a lot of the glossolalia is not quite glossolalia. You actually find out memorize little formulas.
Yeah.
And yeah, this Pentecostal preacher or whatever this person was considered themselves, they were uttering names from some Bosnian demons, I guess. That region, and I'm like, I just happened to be able to find that piece of information. So there's so many languages in the world that are even spoke, and there's probably a good 7 times as many that aren't spoken anymore.
Yeah, it's quite popular over here, like the Pentecostal church. There was a big sort of like movement called the Jesus Army, and they used to do glossolalia and things like that. And I used to know a girl who was into that, and yeah, it's interesting. Like she used to do it, sort of thing. And
I try to make it an occasional thing, and it's interesting some of the things that it sounds like it comes out, and some stuff it's like, okay, this felt a particular way. I'm writing this stuff down, but there is sometimes, it's like it's like Enochian. I think maybe. Maybe there John Dee there, who was trying to revive the official story. He wrote an apologetic. I don't quite buy the Church of Satan theory about that. It was really the whole thing was really changed to kind of hide him from inquisitors and that sort of thing. But he was trying to bring back the experience, and some of that stuff that came forward, I think some of it goes beyond what.
Yeah, Enochian's the one, isn't it? That's the one that stands out. It's like the pyramids, isn't it? It's like a genuine mystery. Enochian. It's just it's just a shame it's incomplete.
So what is Enochian? Is that from the Book of Enoch? Is it?
Jaefar knows more about it than me.
Goals. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, you know more about it than me. Like.
Yeah, that was one of the goals of John Dee. Is they wanted to retrieve lost the Book of Enoch and stuff like this. And it's interesting. It does have some the material that they got does have some of that connection. It does have a very Old Testament, New Testament.
It has its own structure, doesn't it?
Sort of what?
The Enochian language has its own syntax and structure, doesn't it? It's not just gobbledygook. It's not just like.
Yeah, it's there's stuff about it that's.
And it works.
And the interesting thing is that okay, fine. they tried to appeal to the Catholics because they thought, okay, let's bring the experience back to the church. They actually got approval of John Dee actually got approval of one of the 40 cardinals at the time for the whole thing, but one does not make a change in the church. And he tried to get approval of the Protestants as well. But what was that? What was that? What my point with all that? But anyways, he wanted the experience that he thought was there in the initial church movement.
He couldn't do it himself, could he? He didn't have the power to.
And you know, you can sit with a Satanist and a Christian and a monotheist and maybe something else, and you can all do Enochian magic and everybody with their intentions, and it can kind of work. But if you feel like you have to say the same prayers as John Dee did, or you have to do the Golden Dawn or the Ordo Templi Orientis, or sort of version of the thing, then maybe you don't have that variety to work with. But it's interesting in that respect that you can kind of intend things different. It's like the keys represent spiritual interaction, so you can say that you're evoking all these different things, or you can say you're evoking yourself in a memory, like
that was like Crowley's position, wasn't it? That maybe these spirits are part of our minds or subconscious minds, which is equally fascinating.
Well, I think that quote kind of wasn't the actual original phrase that's you do that to certain you evoke certain parts of your mind. It doesn't mean the beings aren't real. It's that's entirely what you're doing, and that's why rather than just boogity boogity and all that, you really want to have a balance.
Well,
the
Ouija board was sold as a way to speak to your subconscious, wasn't it?
Well, I know it's. Well, that's what I'm saying. That it works like that, and it's like the tarot cards. You go to psychologists and they pull out those ink blot things, and it's like the same thing. So it doesn't make all that much difference whether it's ink blots or cards. Well, I mean it does, but
because the prevalent thing, there's that phrase, isn't there? Like, it's just imagination, but it dismisses the whole of the imagination and the subconscious and these amazing sort of deeper levels of the mind. Oh, it's just imagination. They want to brush it away, don't they?
Imagination is how we get things done that we're not doing. We have these ideas and we act out these ideas and we think out the possibilities of these ideas. That's how we get the deja vu thing, is because we do this when we're waking, and when we're asleep, we probably do it better, that we rearrange everything when we're asleep. And so when you're awake, something that you figured out when you're asleep, you don't quite remember it, but it's like, oh, this happened before. And it's like, but you probably figured out that it could happen. So.
Yeah. Do you think, back to Enochian, because it's incomplete, isn't it? Do you think there's much lost, or do you think we've got enough to work it sort of effectively?
Well, any of the 5 systems, you could say, of Enochian, you can work by itself, and I've kind of proven that to myself. But there is a lot missing. There could be whole books for every one of the 49, because it sounds like possibly most of what is missing. Certainly a lot of it was destroyed by burning and some other, and possibly lost otherwise. It's like, wasn't the original Cotton manuscript that the true and faithful relationship, wasn't that literally found underground? They didn't even know it was out there.
Yeah, I think it was unearthed somewhere, wasn't it, or found somewhere? Yeah. But do you think it's dark, Enochian? Is there a dark tinge to it? Because I know that Edward Kelly and John Dee, they swapped wives, didn't they? Which was quite a heavy thing to do back in those days, wasn't it? I mean, broke 2 of the 10 commandments, didn't it?
Well, certainly. Speaking of the 10 Commandments, I saw this interesting stained glass window. I don't remember where it said this was, but the hand Moses was covering the number 2, the no graven images. So they were basically making the graven image, hiding the commandment of the graven image, which I thought was an interesting touch to it. But there's the sort of things that John Dee and Edward Kelly in particular went through during the experience. The beast that showed up when this particular little paragraph was on the table, the horned and slimy things and whatnot that showed up when that was there, the horrible sensations like boils and bugs and dark shapes and whatnot going around the room, and the fact that some of the beings were sort of tricksters. I do think there's different energies that came forward in the different varieties. Like one of the things that I have done is I've taken all the varieties of the tablets, which I don't see that anybody's done in one place. But there's up to 4 for the 675 squares. There's up to 4 different letters for each square, and that was in different places. For the most part, it's the same throughout, but there's some variation in each of those. But there was sort of a tinge to it, just like I think with Joseph Smith. I have vascular migraines, so that gives me some insight in how some of that stuff worked, but it sounded like it kind of may have went beyond that in a little point. But the sort of entities that would not only say everybody else is wrong and you're going to be right and trying to prop you up with arrogance like that, that would lead me to question some things. But also the idea that year after year after year, I think, 4 years, and then he finally these beings tell him the information, but basically they suggest to him, and then he, whether it's psychosomatic or not, it amounts to the same thing. But basically the entities tortured Joseph Smith until he, was ready for it, or until they just said, okay, you can have it now. You can, here's the, you're going to see what you're going to see. And well, I mean, that's not the words, but you know what I mean.
So do you think Joseph Smith was an initiate then? Do you think, because a lot of people, I don't want to offend anyone, but a lot of people say he was a swindler, don't they? But
yes. Well, he was but perhaps okay, there's 8 different versions of the first vision story, whatever. Most people don't get things to, he may not have been terribly dishonest in that. He could have been, but I'm not negating that possibility, but I don't think it's necessary. I just don't think it doesn't have the authority over me, that sort of thing. But later he became now the most dishonest thing wasn't per se with that. It was as a Freemason, and wasn't he like the Grand Master of Illinois or something? Then he had the temple ceremonies, which was basically his it's really a Baptist Presbyterian kind of church, and basically the things particular to their group became part of the temple rituals, which were really, if you know about Freemasonry, it kind of they blend. It's obvious where the format for the rituals came from. And just like the fact that the Pearl of Great Price facsimiles, the Book of Abraham and the stuff like this was divined. It wasn't translated, it was divined. He looked at the pictures and tried to form a Christian story out of it, like a tarot card reader, sort of trying to direct message where he thought to direct it. Because that's one of the things that kind of took me out of the church, is I knew all this talk about translation, and I mean the great one of the things that you weren't supposed to learn about until you got in the temple, translated as the great copulating bull without equal. And it's like, am I going to have sex with an animal? What's going on here?
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it's on the outer rim, the great copulating bull without equal, and various stuff like this. And I'm like, but you can look at the pictures and make up a Christian story, and that sounds like what he was doing.
That's interesting what you say, that because I think that's the point of Freemason rituals. I think it's not actually the ritual itself. I think when Freemasons get together in this like very ordered environment and do these rituals, I think the point of it is what happens afterwards. Like maybe these rituals provoke dreams, or like not prophetic or like instructional dreams. Like I think that's what Freemasonry is all about. So yeah, Joseph
Well,
Smith could have
aside
done
that,
that.
aside that possibly, the networking feature of the whole thing, there was certainly, the any initiatic society, you form that sense of brotherhood or sisterhood or community or whatever, and that kind of, but it can build character and connections, and uh, you know the fact that they kind of worked all these building guilds and stuff, which tended to be religious orders to begin with, yeah, it could have an experience. And it does, you hear that, Freemasonry was what opened their symbolic thinking.
Yeah,
You're wearing the apron and all that other stuff. Nowadays that when you make the gestures and stuff like that, they're really not going to cut open your bowels and your neck and all that other stuff if you say something. But you don't want to say something because you kind of you no longer feel it's necessary. That's what happens with a lot of groups is people think, I'm going to get into this and I'm going to expose it, and it turns out there's really not the thing to expose that they think.
yeah.
Now, I've kind of done that to a degree. I didn't. It was psychological threats. It wasn't like I swear I'm not. It's like I say that these are your tenets. Signing a paper that says, signing on the line and saying, I agree that these are the tenets of the group, isn't quite the same thing as saying, I swear the curse of, or whatever, or if I divulge these things, and particularly because they were being dishonest about the group. The basic beliefs that they kind of expect of somebody to be a Freemason, the architect of the universe, and that sort of stuff. It's no secret. But the misleading speech in this New Age group they literally called themselves the New Age religion. That was like their subtitle for a while. And, there's a lot of misleading. Oh, it's respect, but not worship. It's like, just admit you worship the guy and you're using these occult techniques, and stop trying to make it sound like, oh, other groups are being a cult, but don't worry, we're not being a cult.
Yeah, if honesty's not there, the whole thing just goes to pot, doesn't it?
And some sick guy that's I can't eat white bread, I can't eat dairy, I can't eat probably not meat, but probably just the antibiotics and stuff in the meat, which does cause various short and long-term problems for people. And I understand that. On both sides of my family, dairy issues. Most people get used to it. They take allergy medication and, just deal with the fact that their stomachs and stuff don't work as well. But, and they don't live as long because eventually they get some serious problems or something. But, I understand those three things. But to say you're the most advanced, but I avoid these things. I don't eat the bleach bread and all that other stuff. It actually throws my pH off to the point that it affects my lab results. When I quit all that bleach food and started eating whole food, I saw in my lab results drastic differences, and they didn't even think. It's just, okay, here's some blood pressure medication, here's this, that, and the other. They don't care about, it's like psychiatrists, they don't care about chemical imbalances, or else they get your labs. They would address the chemical imbalances via your labs. Back in the 90s, they kind of, I'm rambling off, I think, but
Right.
back in the 90s, they started coming up with these drug use syndromes to say, we can't diagnose you with the following mental illnesses because they're drug use syndromes. If you're drinking 5 cups of coffee a day, maybe you don't have ADHD and depression. Maybe we need to see what you're like without coffee for at least 5 days, man. But people don't do that. Back in the 1950s and 1940s, there was even the literature about the white bread and stuff like this causing as serious as schizophrenia, but they just want to drug you down to a certain state. They just want a diagnosis. And I think women have got the harder hit with this one, because it seems like every other woman is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder,
Yeah.
or bipolar or something. And I'm like, I just thought that's how women were. I wasn't terribly critical. It was just how most of them were. That's what I thought. But now they, people are taught to feel like they're mentally ill, and I'm like,
oh, while
no.
you speaking about medical and food and stuff, I was reading a thing the other day. A scientist now thinks that Parkinson's could be related to could be related to the gut. It could actually be related to food.
Yeah, there are effects on the various neurotransmitters by what's done. There's long term. Part of the problem with some of these is there's long term effects. It's like coffee and Alzheimer's. The coffee linked to the caffeine linked to Alzheimer's. I mean, caffeine's okay as a surface chemical, but when it's inside you, it's, aside from flushing your bowels, it doesn't really have too much in terms of long-term benefit. But the interesting thing about coffee, if you know this one, is that rather than an overall negative effect on your energy levels and stuff, if all you do is smell the coffee, it actually has a slightly positive effect in terms of that. That doesn't go away like, the crash is bigger than the thing with the regular caffeine.
Yeah, going back to dementia, I think they should do a study that I'm convinced that a lot of dementia cases are people who watch TV too much. I think that's probably causes it.
They've tied certain aspects of, well, okay, sheer fiction, you don't use as much of your brain as you do when you reality, mythology, whatever it is. I mean, mythology definitely, it represents reality. It has a meaning and a purpose. It doesn't mean it's not true. But anyways, I'm sure you know that. But one of the factors that shortens people's lifespans is anything over 40 decibels is actually bad on the heart. You don't want to be. We're meant to respond like, okay, either hide from the storm or the animal, or I got to fight someone or something. So we're not meant to be exposed to this. That's why they say the people who wipe off their shoes and maybe even take off their shoes before going to the house, that reduces the vacuuming and that increases the lifespan. And there's been vacuums around long enough to show that alone shows a difference. And that's part of why I don't think there's, for the first time in a century and a half, as of a couple years ago, there's no one alive that's 140 years old, because we get old and we get exposed to all this the volume is a huge factor in our health. It's like I'm a music therapist in a way of saying, pretty much entirely myself, but I try to use it to cause a certain set of effects, but the volume associated with that, it's not like I've seen people all over the place, and there's certainly exceptions, but it's like when they have their time off of work, they're more stressed and stuff at the end of the day than if they actually went to work, because they just listen to, they're entertaining themselves to death more or less. But you control your stress level, but again, you raise it overall when you aren't careful with these things.
I know about sound, like when I'm walking outside and it's very windy, I know that really annoys me intensely. The wind's just blowing in my face, and that sort of, the sound of the wind. And yeah, I think there's something to that, definitely. Yeah.
Well, you're familiar with the frequencies in old houses and the haunting sensation.
Yeah. No frequencies. Yeah.
Which, yeah, I remember earlier in the I think of it as last year, but earlier in the year when they had that, oh no, these idiots are going to try to actually raid a government, one of the most armed military bases in the world.
Yeah.
Not raid at all, but one of the things they tried to pull, aside from the chanting, I mean, go back to your mother's basement chanting that you're going to bring out the aliens so we can have sex with them. What did they hear that one off of Sodom and Gomorrah stories? But people were saying that, oh, we would have done it, except they had they had electromagnetic weapons that made us afraid. And it's like they lined up tanks where there wasn't anywhere where you weren't going to see a tank there. It's like, and they told the crowd what the tanks were for. It's like, if more than one or two of you try to cross the lines, these are what the tanks are for. And they posted, someone posted on the Air Force website, here's the plane. If you actually come in a city full of people after us, we're just going to, they literally cleared out employees to prepare to do that sort of thing. But I made my point about the false claim that it was energy weapons or something, but
yeah. Have you got any more questions, Hemi? I've been up for like 24 hours. I'm enjoying this talk, but
we've been going for 2 hours. 2 hours in total is generally about our limit, isn't it?
I'm enjoying this talk immensely, but my mind's just going blanker and blanker.
We can always have Jaefar back another day, can't we?
Yeah, maybe we'll get a couple of topics together or something. It's been like an enjoyable sort of roam around various topics. Yeah.
Yeah, we covered some ground, didn't we?
Yeah.
Not quite the usual ground, but it was good ground.
Right, so are we calling it there then?
I just can't speak anymore. My mind's gone.
Yeah, I've had a pretty rough day too. So we're gonna go. Jaefar, if you want to plug yourself, where can people find you? Have you got any books out or anything? Just let everybody know.
Well, I had an anti-conspiracy article published in Coranzon 4 by Martinet Press, but for the most part, just my Twitter account and my that has some comments from stuff, but my my YouTube page is pretty much what I'm operating right now.
I didn't know you had a Twitter. Can you say your address or your Twitter address? Or
it's the same thing. Jaefar SABNW, which the last part happens to be an abbreviation, but there's no dots in that.
All right, I'll look that up. Yeah,
and that's that's the YouTube, but that I got deplatformed from the Facebook after I was maintaining over 20,000 followers, but that was disappointing. I don't know. It's a shame my YouTube hasn't gotten anywhere near that big, but I do affect some people, so that's what I'm in it for. As long as I can, as long as I'm not the only one going through my material.
I suppose that's what we're trying to do here. Just have a free form, free thinking sort of thing, and yeah.
Well, that certainly keeps it authentic. I don't want to be one of these guys officially plugging as part of the show.
Yeah.
Not that I wouldn't mind making money from doing media, but some of that just seems, it takes the integrity from the thing. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we just do it. Like if we've had a guest on, just let our people know where they can find you if they enjoyed your content.
Yeah, I have a bunch of lists. Some stuff I'll do stuff like on a yearly basis, some stuff more. So don't get overwhelmed by the sheer number of videos. Look up a playlist, look up a subject. I've pretty much covered at least a broad form of anything I could think of spiritually.
Right, so that'll be us for tonight. Night all. Do you want to say night? Zero.
Yeah, it's great talking to you, Jaefar. Yeah, I will be watching your videos. Yeah, and I recommend other people do as well. Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye all.